Straight ahead on Law & Crime Daily, Walmart takes on Kanye West as a battle over brand logos heats up. And the Department of Justice launching a civil investigation into the Louisville Kentucky Police Department more than a year after the shooting death of Breonna Taylor.
The investigation will be led by our Civil Rights Division.
Plus, the family of Andrew Brown sees the sheriff's office body cam footage of his death. But should it be made public? And the state of Maryland to review the former work of a key defense expert in the Derek Chauvin trial following his testimony. Why retired medical examiner Dr. David Fowler's handling of in-custody deaths is now being questioned. Law & Crime Daily, covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome to Law & Crime Daily, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber in for Brian Buckmire, along with co-host Terri Austin. Maryland's Attorney General is calling for a review of cases involving a key defense witness in Derek Chauvin's trial. Law & Crime's Angenette Levy explains why the deaths to be reviewed involve people who've died in police custody.
Dr. David Fowler was the chief medical examiner for the state of Maryland for 17 years. Following his testimony for the defense in the trial of Derek Chauvin, the Attorney General for the state of Maryland says he believes that some of Fowler's work needs to be reviewed.
His significant contributory conditions would be the toxicology, the fentanyl and methamphetamine. There is exposure to a vehicle exhaust.
Dr. Fowler mentioning vehicle exhaust and his opinion that George Floyd's manner of death should be classified undetermined and not homicide raised eyebrows. It prompted this letter signed by physicians demanding a review of Fowler's work, calling the open-air carbon monoxide exposure claim baseless and revealed obvious bias and raised malpractice concerns. Fowler's opinion ran contrary to the pathologist who conducted Floyd's autopsy.
Well, it's a pattern in practice.
Attorney Ken Ravenel claims Dr. Fowler provides cover to police when someone dies in custody. He represents the family of Anton Black in a federal lawsuit. Black died in 2019 after being handcuffed and restrained by officers. Dr. Fowler ruled the death an accident.
Why does Dr. Fowler and his team constantly ignore the obvious to try to search for other reasons? We have to put a stop to this.
Maryland Attorney General Brian Frosh released a statement saying he's been in conversations with Governor Larry Hogan's office about the need for a review of Dr. Fowler's findings. The AG's office represents Dr. Fowler and others in the Black lawsuit. A spokesperson said, "We have taken steps to wall off those in our office who are representing the Office of Chief Medical Examiner and its current and former employees, including Dr. Fowler, from those who might be involved in any review of the medical examiner's reports." The attorney for Anton Black's family says this review has been a long time coming, while Dr. Fowler actually released a statement through his employer saying he stands behind the outstanding work that his staff performed during his time as chief medical examiner. For Law & Crime Daily, I'm Angenette Levy.
All right, thanks, Angenette. Joining us is legal analyst Dina Dahl, along with Terri Austin. So, Terri, it sounds like the AG is going to take a close look at these past medical reports. If discrepancies are found, could Dr. Fowler face charges?
He could, Jesse. You know, he definitely could lose his license. That's a big issue here. But what they're looking for is a pattern of bias. And if they find that, he might lose his license. They could even find gross negligence. They've talked about that, or even fraud. And that would be a bigger issue. As Angenette reported, we know that he's being sued by Antoine Black's family. And so if they find that he was, culpable there, he could face a lot of financial problems in that suit.
Dina, let me ask you this. If Fowler's conclusions that they come out as problematic, could Derek Chauvin rely on that in an appeal and say, hey, look, ineffective assistance of counsel, Eric Nelson, why did you choose this guy for my defense?
Probably not. And the reason why, if there is some sort of bias, it's in favor of the police. And Chauvin here was acting as a police officer, so that would mean his bias was actually favorable to him. So that would have helped him in his defense, not hurt him in his defense. And also, it was reasonable for his lawyer to rely on him. He is right now in private practice, and his opinion was actually a collaboration of about 13 experts done under a private practice opinion. So he would not have a leg to stand on in this regard for the appeal.
Well, there's going to be a microscope on Dr. Fowler's work, and it'll be interesting to see the outcome of what ultimately happens. Now, back to Derek Chauvin. He is going to be sentenced on June 16th, and in the meantime, he's being held in state prison. So we asked psychologist and law and crime expert Dr. John Delatorre what time behind bars might feel like for the ex-cop.
Devastating. I mean, here he was, someone that had the authority, someone that had the power, someone that had a badge, who at some point in his life thought that he was doing the right thing and protecting society, only now to be in a place where other people that he knows, other people might try to hurt him, that he has to be moved away and kept in segregated. The clinks of the bars, I mean, just that sound, just repeatedly over and over and over again, absolutely is so much of a toll on a former police officer. I think at this point now he needs to humanize himself. He decided not to do it during the trial, and that makes sense. But now it's sentencing time, and now how much time he serves in prison is going to be based on a lot of different factors. And I'm thinking the judge probably wants to hear from him too, to see, is he contrite, right? Is he someone that understands the authority that he had, the role that he played, and is he sorry for what he did?
Reality for Derek Chauvin. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, a North Carolina family is looking for answers after Andrew Brown was shot and killed by deputies trying to arrest him. But first, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland is launching an investigation into the death of Breonna Taylor. We'll break that case down on the other side of this break. Stay tuned. The Department of Justice is launching a civil investigation into the Louisville, Kentucky government and police department following the death of Breonna Taylor. Taylor was killed last March after officers executed a no-knock warrant in her home. Former officer Brett Hankinson is facing charges for shooting into Taylor's neighbor's apartment, but no one is charged in her death. Federal investigators are already looking into possible additional criminal charges. Now the city and police department could be civilly liable.
The investigation will assess whether LMPD engages in a pattern or practice of using unreasonable force, including with respect to people involved in peaceful, expressive activities. It will determine whether LMPD engages in unconstitutional stops, searches, and seizures, as well as whether the department unlawfully executes search warrants on private homes. It will also assess whether LMPD engages in discriminatory conduct on the basis of race or fails to provide public services that comply with the Americans with Disability Act.
So, Terri, this is the second time in less than a week that AG Garland has announced an investigation into the pattern and practices of a police department. Of course, I'm talking about Minneapolis. Is this an indication of things to come?
Absolutely, Jesse. There's no question in my mind. Garland is really going to try to make sure that the police departments across the country are acting without bias. So now you see first Minneapolis, then Louisville, and I can guarantee you that he's probably going to look into the shooting of Andrew Brown in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, because there are so many questions about that video. So I think that he is going to think about each and every case that we've seen across the country in the past few years where there has been no charge and no indictment and no prosecution, and he will look at the pattern and practice in all of those departments.
You know, Terri, you mentioned North Carolina. Let's talk about that for a second, because another family is struggling to get answers. And as you said, it's in the fatal shooting of a man by deputies last week. Andrew Brown was killed as deputies in Elizabeth City attempted to serve him with an arrest warrant. His family and attorney were able to view the sheriff's office police body cam footage on Monday. They say the 20 seconds of video shows deputies blocking him in his car, and he had his hands on the steering wheel when he tried to get away from the deputies who were shooting. Now, few details have been released, but a death certificate says that Brown died from a gunshot wound to the head. The sheriff says that he supports the video being released publicly if a judge permits.
We want transparency. We want the body camera footage made public. Some people have falsely claimed that my office has the power to do so. That is not true. Only a judge can release the video. That's why I've asked the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation to confirm for me that the releasing of the video will not undermine their investigation. Once I get that confirmation, our county will file a motion in court, hopefully Monday, to have the footage released.
Okay, let's break it down. Dina, the chances that this video, this footage, actually gets released to the public and we all see it?
I think it's a very good chance. And you see here what he's saying. He needs confirmation, and the release of it is not going to impede an investigation. If he does not get that, he will not file the motion to the court asking for it. Obviously, there aren't privacy concerns. The family wants this to be released. This will be released. Will there be any sort of delay because of the investigation? That's really unclear. It sounds like it really is based on whether or not that department is going to tell the judge if it needs any time before releasing it.
Terri, there's something a bit confusing here because the family is filing a court order to view the body cam footage, but in other jurisdictions, the footage is just automatically released. Should that be the uniform procedure across the country?
Absolutely. We should get as many uniform procedures across the country as we can. You know that the George Floyd Policing Act was passed in the House. It's still pending as far as the Senate is concerned. There's only so much that we can do on a federal level. They can't really control what each police department is doing, although they can have certain mandates like no chokeholds. But what we are seeing is that the Attorney General is looking at these patterns and practices, and perhaps we will have consent decrees with these various cities so that most of them will be doing things like showing the video cam from the bodies of the police officers. So hopefully it'll be more uniform.
It'll be important to view that body cam footage by everyone. And coming up on Law&Crime Daily, wanted on federal charges for failing to return a VHS tape 2 decades ago. We're going to tell you about one Texas woman's story. Plus, a father's outrage as his son's alleged murderer files for a new defense. Why a former Miami security guard chose to represent himself at trial. Next. Welcome back, everybody. A Miami security guard was accused of fatally shooting a man at a strip club. Law&Crime founder and host of the A&E series Court Cam, Dan Abrams, explains the family of the victim became outraged as they learned the defense's strategy.
We're in the Miami-Dade County Criminal Court for a hearing related to the murder trial of Lucas Kendall.
Well, the first thing we needed to address is he's been restored to competency.
Correct, Your Honor. There are 2 evaluations from Dr. Ruiz-Quintana and Dr. Richardson. They both find that he's competent.
Kendall's just been deemed competent to stand trial, where he faces charges of second-degree murder and attempted murder. While working as an armed security guard at a Miami strip club, Kendall approached 2 men who were sitting inside a truck in the parking lot. Kendall claims one of the men threatened him. He says he also believed one of them had a weapon. So he opened fire, killing one of them with 8 shots, 4 of them in the back. Both men were unarmed. In the gallery today are friends and family of the deceased victim, Kawan Burr, including his devastated parents. To evaluate his competency, Kendall was moved from a prison to a hospital. And defense attorney Carlos Gonzalez wants to keep him there, fearing what might become of his client's mental state if he returns to jail.
And then the issue is that you want him housed where?
At the same facility he's been housed.
In order to prevent him from decompensating?
Yes, Your Honor. He eventually decompensated to the point where he was sitting in a fetal position, naked, not eating, and not interacting with any human being.
As Gonzalez goes on, the request to prevent Kendall from returning to jail becomes just too much for Bird's father to bear.
Yeah, but my son is dead, man. My son is dead. He needs to go to prison. He don't need to be laying no mental hospital. He need to go to prison, man. Come on, church. He want to play crazy. He wasn't crazy when he murdered my son, man. He wasn't crazy then, but he crazy now.
Take him out.
All of a sudden, he crazy now. You want to lay in a mental hospital?
Take him out.
You done murdered my son, man, for nothing. When he was trying to get away from you. You was trying to get away from you, man. And you kept shooting him while his back was under the truck. You kept shooting him, man. You kept shooting him in his back. His back was turned to you, man. He was trying to get away from you. And you murdered him, man, like you. You murdered him, man, like that.
The distraught father is escorted out of the courtroom. His family members look on. Meanwhile, the defendant just watches it all unfold. At trial, Kendall decided to represent himself and attempted to use the stand your ground defense.
So the trajectory coming from outside the vehicle would have to come in that downward.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you're referring to.
He was convicted on both charges and is now serving a life sentence in the Florida prison system.
Wow. Court Cam airs Wednesdays on the A&E networks. When we come back, Kanye West facing more legal trouble. Is his clothing company's logo too similar to a logo from a retail giant? The arguments on the other side of this break. The criminal case against Jeffrey Epstein's ex-girlfriend Ghislaine Maxwell is growing as prosecutors now charge her with sex trafficking. The former socialite faced her judge in person for the first time to plead not guilty to 2 new charges. A federal grand jury indicted Maxwell last month for sex trafficking. Prosecutors say she groomed and paid a 14-year-old girl to engage in sex acts with Epstein at his Palm Beach home from 2001 to 2004. This indictment adds a 4th victim and expands the time frame of the allegations. Maxwell's lawyers are requesting a delay in her trial, which was set for July 12th of this year due to the additional charges. Well, Kanye West is in hot water, but not from his soon-to-be ex-wife Kim Kardashian. Walmart is suing the Yeezy brand over its Sunburst or Spark logo, saying it's just too similar to theirs. The big box store is also claiming that West LLC offers, quote, highly related and directly overlapping services like apparel. Walmart wants to make it clear that they do not have a relationship with Yeezy. Attorneys for Walmart filed a notice of opposition to the Yeezy Corporation's application for a trademark of its logo. All right, so let's talk about this. Dina, the likelihood that West just drops the logo, he goes with something else, he's a creative guy, or do you think he'll actually fight this? What benefit does he have to fight it?
If he fights it, I think he will eventually lose because Walmart has had this logo since 2007. So it's a valid pre-existing logo, and it does look like there is some overlap, especially Walmart's position that these days they have partnerships with celebrities, and that makes it even more confusing. We've seen the mashup of the logo with Gap and Yeezy, and so there is some sort of customer confusion, not only with the image, but the fact of, is there a question of this being its own mashup? Mm-hmm. So if he pursues it, I think he will ultimately lose. You know, it looks pretty similar, but Walmart's claiming this trademark infringement. Terry, is that, how's likelihood can you get to win that? I mean, how tough is it to prevail on that claim?
Well, I actually think I agree with Dina here. They could prevail. What the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office says is that you have to have a valid mark, meaning that it was registered or that you've been using it, and you have to have used it prior to when the defendant used it. So we clearly know that Walmart had the mark first, and then they have to show that there's some likelihood of confusion, and they can cause that with real people who have actually been confused. They can submit some sort of evidence saying these individuals were confused, or they can just say, look, we think it will likely cause confusion. So if they can do that, I think that Walmart will prevail. And I think that he's going to have to use another mark that doesn't look exactly like this sun logo. And perhaps, you know, he can go in another direction.
I don't know. More drama with Kanye West. Over now to Texas, where a woman found out that she was wanted on federal embezzlement charges in Oklahoma for failing to return a VHS tape in 1999. Karen McBride is pleading not guilty for forgetting to return Sabrina the Teenage Witch tape, saying she didn't even remember renting the video. She learned about the charges while trying to change her name after she got married in Texas. Meanwhile, the Movie Palace in Norman, Oklahoma, where McBride rented the VHS tape from, that closed in 2008. Now, the Cleveland County District Court has dropped the charges, but in order to clear her record, McBride needs her case expunged. So, Dina, pretty hilarious, pretty incredible this happened. How come no one came after her before?
Well, I think one thing that helped her was that she moved. She was in Texas instead of Oklahoma. If she had ever gotten stopped for some sort of speeding ticket and they did a search of her name, they would have seen that there was this arrest warrant out there. But the fact that she was no longer in the same state, she must have not had any interaction with police. This was a misdemeanor. They weren't going to start crossing state lines looking for her. So I think that really delayed her getting served with this warrant.
Now, Terry, the charges were dropped, but the record hasn't been expunged. What does it take to expunge a record?
Well, you know, it's always something, Jesse, but to expunge the record actually takes a little bit of effort on her part. She's going to actually have to file a petition to get it expunged. Expunged means it's completely and totally, utterly destroyed, that no one will ever see a piece of paper. So the arrest record, you know, if there's any sort of indictment, any sort of criminal record will actually be expunged. But the judge has to look at that petition, has to consider all of the information, and then he has to actually, or she has to actually make a decision as to whether or not this can be expunged. And the judge will look at lots of various factors.
I don't know. I just look at this and I kind of miss VHS tapes. That's what I take away from this. Dina, Terry, I appreciate you coming on and breaking this all down with me. Thanks for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.